Hi, good morning. I'm Gabe Johansson, co-owner of Live Nutritious Fitness, and today I've invited Nate Darnell. He's a research analyst for Diabetes Support Services, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about ionized alkaline water, some of the myths and facts surrounding that. Good morning, Nate. How are you?
Good morning, Gabe. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me in the studio this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Nate, tell us a little bit about the history of alkaline water and ionized water.
Sure. Well, I think it's important. Thanks for letting everyone know what my background is. I work with a community outreach organization here in Salem, and it's geared predominantly towards improving quality of life for the diabetic population. And a couple of years ago, I was introduced to the technology you're referring to, and coming from a scientific background, I was very skeptical of the technology, and I guess fortunately I was exposed to it from a Fulbright scholar, so she kind of strong-armed me into looking at some of the genuine clinical documentation, and we actually found additional, and we've since put together an entire compendium. But what I also found in the process was that there was so much misinformation online, and it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming even for someone with a technical background. It seemed that there were people that were making all kinds of absurd health claims about it, and then there were healthcare practitioners that were claiming that it was complete snake oil and bunk. And my job was to kind of sift out the truth, from what was not truthful, and to kind of shoot down the middle and figure out, what's actually accurate. And so it took me about 2.5 years to do that, and ultimately what I discovered over time was that there was a historical narrative of the technology which is inaccurate, and that's many people believe that it originated in Japan. And it didn't actually come from Japan. It actually came from Great Britain in the late 1800s. And it was used predominantly for disinfection purposes. Then it was used in World War I for surgical disinfection. And it was only during World War II that the technology was introduced to Japan. And they began using it following a lot of the devastating consequences of nuclear radiation exposure, starvation. They had a broken medical system after World War II. They had lack of pharmaceutical medications. And by happenstance, they discovered that electrolyzed reduced water, which is the correct technical term for ionized alkaline water, was very effective at reducing intestinal abnormal fermentation, dyspepsia, acid indigestion. And from that point forward, it became kind of like an aspirin to the Japanese medical system. And so it's been around for several decades. And it's really been refined in Japan, but that's not really where it came from. Okay. And interestingly enough, it was in the United States in the 1920s as well. And it's hard for me to decipher exactly why it didn't continue in the healthcare environment in the United States. I would hazard to guess because many of the byproducts are not patentable, they're natural, that it didn't fit into the business paradigm of Western medicine. And again, Japan has a very different medical system than we have in the United States. They have a socialized healthcare system that was really rebuilt after World War II from the standpoint of genuine disease prevention,
right,
not from the standpoint of disease treatment alone, which is what we practice in the United States. And that's why we rely so heavily on synthetic pharmaceutical medications instead of preventative measures. And again, my opinion is that ties in more to a business model than to the end game of optimal health. Really, it was refined in Japan. It was developed in Great Britain, went through the United States. Interestingly enough, we used it on the Apollo and Gemini space capsules to produce potable water, heat, and electricity for the astronauts. In the United States, it kind of remained pigeonholed in both the aerospace and automotive industries. And it really didn't come back to the United States until about 10 years ago. And I think the real challenge was that when it did come back into the U.S. market, it didn't come through academic or healthcare channels. It came through entrepreneurs who, by and large, whether or not it was intentional or accidental, it didn't have a very strong technical background, and they began explaining the technology in a way which was technically inaccurate.
Yeah.
And this kind of narrative has perpetuated over the past couple of years, and it's contributed to a lot of misinformation about the technology.
So many of the claims out there, both for and against, are completely wrong.
Well, some of them are completely wrong, and not all of them. There are significant health benefits to be had, but I think first and foremost there's the technology, unfortunately, in many cases, has been sold under the premise that it cures cancer, and this is technically inaccurate. But it follows in line with the concept that the alkaline diet cures cancer too, and this is also technically inaccurate. There are well over 200 different forms of cancer. Some of them respond to changes in alkalinity acidity, some of them don't. But I think what happened was that there was a selling point and there was an emotional appeal, and of course cancer is an epidemic,
right,
and it's a tragic epidemic. It's caused by numerous different things, and yes, nutritional intervention does have a significant impact on your risk factors for developing it and your ability to recover from it. At the same time, making the claim that consuming an alkaline solution is going to cure your cancer is patently false.
Right.
But people will buy it based on that. And I think this is what Western medicine has had the biggest problem with, is that there are people selling it from this vantage point, or selling the technology without having substantial documentation to back up that claim.
So when you talk about, you said electrolyzed reduced water is the proper way to call it, not alkaline ionized water.
Right, right. And I think, in my personal preference is just to call it antioxidant water.
Okay.
Electrolyzed reduced is what we use in genuine technical documentation, laboratory and clinical studies. There's both electrolyzed reduced, which is antioxidant water, and then electrolyzed oxidizing water, which is an oxidizing water,
okay,
which we can use topically for antibacterial solutions, for instance, like hard surface disinfection.
Okay.
What I discovered over time was that although the technology and the drinks were being sold, like this alkaline aspect was really the primary health benefit, and that's not technically accurate. Electrolyzed water, the antioxidant kind, is actually a very, very weak alkaline buffer. It's not like the equivalent of putting baking soda in water, which is very alkaline, and drinking that. It's a much more effective alkaline buffer. Nonetheless, that alone will not cure cancer either.
Okay.
But people consume it with the belief that it does. Now, it may have a positive impact in some individuals, but it's by no means a cure. On the other hand, what is very powerful about antioxidant water, which is technically electrolyzed reduced water, is that it contains a lot of hydrogen gas, and that's kind of distinct. Acidic solutions have hydrogen, but it's a single proton missing an electron, so it's stealing electrons, and that's why it's acidic. Hydrogen gas actually has complete electrons in its outer electron rings, and it can donate electrons, and that's what actually makes it a very powerful antioxidant. Okay. So we can, if you produce electrolyzed water through an electrolysis machine, the water will stay in solution for a period of several hours to several days if it's refrigerated, and if you consume it, it has strong health benefits.
So Nate, here at Live, we help a lot of the diabetic population as well. We do meal planning, nutrition counseling, grocery shopping trips, and we've had a lot of success with people reversing diabetes through eating the right kinds of food. What kind of success have you seen with the hydrogen gas rich water in the diabetic population?
Yeah, we've seen some really good results using electrolyzed reduced water for daily consumption. We know it, and this is actually based not only on the clinical documentation that we possess, but actually on an event that happened 20 years ago called the Nordenau phenomenon in Nordenau, Germany, which is actually what kickstarted a lot of the research into both natural reduced water and electrolyzed reduced water. The event in Nordenau happened around 1992, and it was actually kind of an accident. There's a slate mine in Nordenau, Germany, which was a slate mine in World War II. It was converted to not a retirement resort, but kind of a regular resort hotel somewhere in the 1970s. And there's a cave that runs through the resort with a natural aquifer and a natural stream that runs through it. And several individuals had gone to this resort they were terminally ill, and they were there for their last hurrah, for lack of a better term. And several of them experienced spontaneous remissions of their diseases. And it was spectacular enough that several physicians from the local community came out to investigate and document the events. And what came out of that was additional research where these physicians had enrolled the assistance of several scientists from Japan that were able to do quantitative analysis on the cave. And what they realized was that there was a significant amount of hydrogen gas that was being evolved from the cave. There was some organic process that was happening underground. The water itself was saturated in hydrogen gas, and then the air in the cave was also saturated. And again, it behaved like a very powerful antioxidant. So these individuals apparently had disorders that were resolved. I guess there was a very strong underlying component of oxidative stress. I don't know exactly what their diseases were, but it was significant enough to where it created a whole lot of spectacle. And then a follow-up study was done on several hundred diabetic patients, and what they discovered was that after 6 days of exposure to water coming out of this cave, now called the Nordenau water, their biomarkers began changing significantly for the better, and several diabetics were technically non-diabetic, diabetic type 1s. Of course, they were not cured of their disease, but they all had significant positive changes in their biomarkers.
Wow.
And this subsequently became known as the medically documented Nordenau phenomenon. And out of that came more research regarding a way to produce the water if you don't have access to the cave. There are only, I think, 2 to 3 places around the world that have this occurring naturally that we're aware of. One of them is in Nordenau, Germany. One of them is in Hida Tenryosui in Japan. And another one is located, I think, in Tlacote, Mexico, or Tecate, Mexico. But the only one that has really been highly documented is the Nordenau one. And again, many physicians, many healthcare practitioners are unaware of this. As a matter of fact, I've never met a single standard Western healthcare practitioner that has been aware of this document or this study before I shared it with them. I've met a couple of naturopaths that were mildly familiar with it, but not a standard MD. And so I really felt that it was important to start documenting this and making sure that they were aware of it. And again, within the diabetic population, using medically certified electrolytic water generators, we can produce a reduced water as well. And reduced simply means that's technical jargon for antioxidant. That's what we use in the laboratory setting. Oxidizing means that it causes rust. Reduced means that it reduces rust, for a better term. So we could technically call it antioxidant water.
Wow.
And I think that's easier for most people. I mean, it gets confusing with all the technical jargon after a while, but again, it's really not the alkalinity that's the therapeutic component or the health component. It's the antioxidant potential of the water that has a significant health benefit.
Well, I have so many questions for you, Nate, about the water, but thank you so much for answering some of those questions, and I hope that maybe we can do some videos in the future talking about some other questions that we have surrounding that. So it would be hydrogen gas-rich water, an antioxidant water would really be a better way to refer to it.
Exactly, and I'd love to come back.
Okay, well here at Live, we really strive for optimum health and well-being through eating real food, and we teach our clients how to eat, how to find that and fit that into their day. And so adding this hydrogen-rich water sounds like a perfect way to add to that diet. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for being here.